all right. Yep, here we are on a Thursday morning, me and Pumelele Mashiko. And hopefully you are up and at 'em and ready to get this week off to an awesome ending as much as you got it off to a good start, right? I mean, that's what we're hoping. It's the 10th of November already. I mean, it's just yeah, I know.
Hello, hi.
I know, and you're already getting those emails from people where they say, hi, I'm not in the office. Can you contact me in January of 2023? And I'm like, really? You're already off?
I have received a couple of emails saying our December holiday schedule.
Yeah.
And I must say, I did side-eye them a little.
Oh, sure. No, come
really?
on.
Stop
Come on,
this.
guys. Really. Exactly. So there's something crackling on your microphone. So if
Something crackling on my microphone.
Yeah, if Homolemo and
Simbewe.
just take a look so we can just figure out what's going on over there. It's like going every now and then. All right, so let's look at the U.S. election
Black Friday
results.
SMSs.
Oh, really? Already?
Well, that's what Tracy's getting. Black Friday. When is Black Friday? Simbewe.
End of this month, right?
She can't see me.
Oh.
Hey, it's going
she
to
says
be
Black Friday SMSs, make it stop, make it go away. Ugh. You know, I know lots of people in America who've been complaining about election ads because they've been inundated with those for the last while. You know, and
yeah, but they were voting on Tuesday, so it's over now. Apparently, there's a crackle on the mic.
It's definitely your mic, and it's coming from your side. So we'll figure that out.
Okay, Simpu is going to figure it out, or she's going to change the microphone.
Speaking of elections, let's just take a look. Because, America, despite being this first world country where everything works, they don't seem to be able to count their votes. It takes them much, much longer than South Africa or Bangladesh or Afghanistan. I mean, even third
but
world.
They do also have a mail-in voting system, right? So they also have lots and lots and lots of people who don't go to the ballots, who just mail their votes in.
Why would you do that? I mean, apart from like the military who are stationed overseas.
Because you know what they don't get? They don't get a day off to vote like we do.
But they don't need it.
People have like 3 jobs in America.
Can I tell you something? I don't think there should be. We should make voting harder, not easier. And I'll tell you why. Your most motivated voters. No. Yes, your most motivated voters in America need to be the ones who cast the ballots. I mean, they're talking about, yes, Phumi. They talk about how I say less people should vote, not more. You don't think so?
The less people vote, so very similar to what we're having here at home, right? The less people vote, the less they are inclined to stick to the rules. So we have very few people showing up for the ballot now, less and less each time we vote. And guess what? We have more and more of service delivery protests. Basically, general mayhem out there because people feel
they make all these excuses for people, right? They're like, oh, people in America, you shouldn't have to have voter ID. This is what people are actually saying. You should be able to, that woman from The View, Sunny Hostin or whatever her name is. She says,
I don't know who the women from The View are.
Don't worry, I'll just give you the name, and you look her up if you care. But even if you don't, it doesn't matter. One of those crazy hens on The View. She goes, I had such trouble filling in my son's vote for him. She voted for her son and sent in a mail-in vote for him. Now, he's nothing wrong with him. He is around. He could have voted for himself. But she voted for him. I don't know if she even asked him. It's just the weirdest thing. Like, we would never. I can't vote on your behalf, Phumi. In America, they can do that. Yes. She voted for
the good news is we are going to have a whole chunk of conversation about the vote in America later this morning.
That's why I don't want to go into too much of it now. But safe to say that the Republicans thought they were going to have a red wave, and it turned out to be like this pathetic, like not even it wasn't even a red swimming pool. It was like a red jacuzzi bath. That's all there is to it. It's just they've got lots to be embarrassed about anyway. So lots of people with plenty of technical advice here. Propaganda says turn the mic gain down and increase the fader level. You see, propaganda knows what he's talking about here.
I have no idea what any of that stuff is. I just sit here.
On crack cocaine, you're making me side with Phumi, and you know how partisan I am against her. Everyone should be forced to vote. No, they shouldn't be. I don't believe that everyone should be forced to vote. I think that you should make voting, you should give people only, listen, I remember last time we had our vote. When was it? 2 years ago, 3 years ago? When did we have our last
year.
Vote?
Which one? The national one or the
national one? National one. I stood in line for over an hour and a half. Remember? And Phumi, you went to the place and then they told you were at the wrong place.
Yes, now, then I could. No, that was last year. So that was last year, the municipal one, where I could only vote for the mayor and not for my councilman. You know, because you get
right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So
the national one isn't so problematic because the national one, as long as you are in the province,
right? Okay.
that you are registered in, you can vote anywhere.
Listen, point is, it should be a difficult thing because you got a lot of people who don't pay any attention to what the politicians are saying. They go along because they get the day off. They're not particularly motivated. We already have a problem in this country with so many people who are apathetic, right? You're not going to get them to suddenly vote by making it easier and easier and easier to vote. It's not going to bring these apathetic people. They don't care because the politicians give them no reason to care. And who could blame them? Who can blame them? I would rather have the more motivated people go to vote. That's what I think. Anyway, I mean, we're not going to get into this debate now. It's the beginning of the day, and we probably will get a headache if we do, right?
As it is, it's been a very, very long week, Gareth. A very long week.
How so for you?
You know what I've been thinking a lot about? I've been thinking, I think we need like mandatory counseling for South Africans. I think we've had enough trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that be wonderful if everybody could have at least 5 sessions with like a therapist?
I think it would be amazing.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons we do Beyond Madness, our podcast series with Prof. Zabo, which everybody should be listening to because they cover all the things from, childhood trauma to drug addiction to violence to the anxiety and depression so many people suffer from, and they cover all of it. Look, a lot of the way they cover it isn't in a therapeutic way. They're actually just discussing it theoretically some of the time, or in terms of
which is enough, right? Which is enough to get some people, because remember there was a time when the idea of anything to do with mental illness or like therapy or any of those things was like, oof, such a
nobody, especially black men would never talk about this stuff, right? And white men, frankly, men wouldn't talk about it. Like, I don't need to see a shrink. There's nothing wrong with me. That kind of thing, right?
I think just even having a conversation, yes, here's the word conversation, that opens it up for people, that this is a thing that you can do, starts the journey. Because I think it's a lot being in this country. There's been a video making the rounds. I think it's Mcebo Dlamini, I think it is. And he was interviewed on one of the news stations a while ago. I've seen this video surface at least 5 times in the past 4 days of him saying, South Africa is a movie. It's just, it's like the drama, the soapy.
Is it not Sihle Ngobese? Big
No, it's not Sihle.
He was posting some stuff this week about how South Africa is the weirdest place in the world. And he put up like videos of Don't touch me on my studio, which we were joking about last week, and Nene falling off his chair in the studio, all of those things. And he's like, this is the funniest country to live in. But he was also being, like,
I think it's a traumatic country to be living in. There's so many things that shock us every day. Shock us every single day that we don't even remember the things that shocked us on Sunday. Like today's Thursday.
You're right, but what are you talking about specifically for this week?
This week. Oh, goodness, where to start?
A long week.
So, Terry Pheto and the Lotto Millions.
Yes, we covered that on Monday morning. That's absolutely scary, because here's one of our proud exports, someone who we thought, well, she's a great example of what we've got and how we can export it. Turns out that she may have, again, allegedly, had her hands in the cookie jar with the National Lottery, and something to the tune of 25 odd million.
And it keeps being ratcheted up, that story. And how the one of the people that one of the co-accused was on top billing with this multi-million rand house.
Yes.
Did you see that?
Crooks. I didn't watch Top Billing, but
no, I didn't. I didn't even know that it was still a thing. But somebody put up a.
Is it back, or because I think Top Billing died like 4 years ago, didn't it? But anyway, I mean, this house was on Top Billing.
Huge.
All right, Terry Pheto. What else?
Terry Pheto and obviously the booths.
Yeah, the booths, which we talked about yesterday with Mum Jane. She came in especially to give us the lowdown on Matthew and
the lowdown with the booth. The Speaker of the Free State and the sex tape.
Ooh, this is such a good story. Well, it's not a good story; it's a terrible story. But apparently, the Speaker
of the hectic story.
Yeah. The Speaker of the Free State Legislature had sex with some Nigerian dude. He filmed it and extorted money from her, right? That's the gist of that one.
That's the gist of that one. But it's what? Like, nobody knew who this lady was outside of the Free State. We should have asked Leeto to come chat with us about her a couple of days ago. And now her fanny's all over the internet.
Well, she joins a long list. She joins a long list of politicians whose private parts have ended up on the internet. Who is it, that guy with the one arm from the veterans? Kebbi Mpatswe. Remember, there's that tape of him.
Yay.
With some Mahosha.
So yesterday's story also with again, we're always happy to hear of people being brought to the dock. 25 million rand tender that was signed off for rail maintenance. And the executive who signed it off without anybody's knowledge, apparently, got 300,000. So the magic number is 300,000. 300,000 is what you pay to not get your video sex all over the internet, or 300,000 is what you pay to get a 25 million rand tender from Transnet.
Let me ask you something. If someone tried to extort money from you, let's say some person who you trusted and you had sex with, and or maybe you didn't even trust them, you just had sex with, and they threatened to then put this on the internet. You didn't know they were filming you, whatever. They threatened to put it on the internet. My modus operandi would be, go for it. I don't care.
Which is what the speaker did.
Good for her then, because you know that person's not going to, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep coming back for more, right? You'll say, have you destroyed the only copy of it? And they'll say, yes, of course I have. And then they haven't. And then they come to you like a month later after you've paid them the 300,000, and then they want another 300,000. And you're like, but I just paid you 300,000. This will carry on forever. So what you've got to do is you just got to say, just put it on the internet. And you know what the worst is? You'll be embarrassed for a couple of days. You'll feel humiliated. You'll very quickly figure out who your real friends and who your real enemies are, because the enemies will gloat and mock, and the friends will say, you know what, we don't really care about that. It happens to people at a much lower level than the Speaker of the Free State Parliament. And then you'd move on with your life. I don't think it'll be there to destroy you forever. What do you think?
I don't know what I really don't know what kind of thing would be the kind of extortionist. But my whole thing is just never do things you would not want seen in public. That's it.
Oh,
Just
but Phumi, I mean, like,
no, 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 no. You
there's
want to have videos, Gareth, videos.
mm,
In the age of the internet, it's been going on since. I mean, it's why we know the Kardashians, isn't it?
yeah, but look how it worked out for the Kardashians and for Pamela Anderson and for Paris Hilton, and
You're
the
you're
business
you're
worked
not a
out. For,
Kada. You're not in America. This is not America.
so, what do you think? I mean, is there any way that she could have done this better? Because she was already. She didn't. Did she know it was being filmed?
She seems to have been the person filming it.
Ooh, ooh.
I'm just saying. Just
Okay,
don't
it's very complicated.
cameras. Leave the cameras out of it, guys. Cameras never do things with cameras.
Here's Tabo. He says apparently it was a video call. The alleged Nigerian guy screen recorded the whole thing. So basically, they didn't film each other. So it was
It
like
was a video call. Even
it was a sex call. Now listen,
you see,
people do this every day, Pumi. People are doing this. This is how people they've like we do the show virtually in the morning. People do virtual sex now. Don't sound so old. You know
I clearly I am. Listen,
the kids
I
doing
knew that this. When I saw the SMS, do you remember the SMSs asking for nudes by a certain senior government
yes,
official?
of course I do. It was a
That's when I
minister.
knew. That's when I knew that this is not for South Africans. Don't do this, guys. And we've had lots of this kind of thing here in South Africa, and it doesn't blow over because every time it gets brought back up, it doesn't blow over. Every time your name is mentioned, every time Malusi Kikaba's name is mentioned, it comes back up.
Tabo says
Ev-
exactly. Now Tabo's with me on this one. People do this every day. It could have happened to anyone. And Ancient Ether agrees. That's so boring, Pumi. Sex calls are ordinary. It happens all the time.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm simply saying don't do it if you don't want to see it on the internet.
Zanele says, but why is her surname Sifuba? That doesn't help matters. Okay. But have you
I'm
heard
not
of
saying
revenge porn? It's really hectic, says Rusty. This is a thing,
it
Pums.
is.
I mean,
A-
you just
And this is
find
why. And this is exactly why. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
yeah.
I'm simply saying if you don't want to see it on the internet, don't do it. If you
Yeah.
don't want to see it on the internet, don't do it.
Or if you're going to do it on the internet, charge for it. Do it as part of
There's a
OnlyFans.
whole there's a whole site for it. There's a whole Pornhub
Right.
site for it.
Charge people money.
But, Mhm.
I just
but
think
all of that is the trauma that I am going through this week. I'm just like we've been subjected to way too
well,
much as South Africans.
yeah, I think so. I mean, also someone said that the Tammy Taylor nails woman from Real Housewives of Pretoria,
Ah,
which I admit, I told Rena in the office on Tuesday, I was forced to watch this. It was on Sunday night. So I finally saw an episode because, Simpiwe has been on my case about how I've got to watch this show. And a lot of people are talking about it. Plus, I was curious. I thought to myself, well, I grew up in
it's in
Pretoria.
your hood. It's in
Maybe I
your
know.
hood.
Right. I thought maybe I'd know one of these women. I don't know any of them, which I was disappointed by. I thought I'd know one or two of them. But the one who seems to be the the protagonist. She seems to be the one who stirs all the shit, and she follows the script and does what the producers need when they want to create conflict. Is this blonde girl from Pretoria who started with her husband? They started Tammy Taylor Nails, right?
So
And
they are the master franchisee. So it's an international brand, Tammy Taylor Nails from America,
okay,
and
all right,
they are the license holders, or used to be the license holders here in South Africa. So
right.
everybody that has a Tammy Taylor establishment has to pay them the franchise fees.
Sure. Like if you open a Nando's or if you open up a,
Spur.
a Colleccio or whatever. Yeah, sure.
Hey, but this saga with
What
this
happened?
woman and her husband has been going on for over a year with carte blanche.
What's the story? I'm not playing dumb. I don't know what this is.
Wow.
Are they crooks? Are they
Her
crooks?
husband is a disbarred lawyer. Yep.
That's
Right.
never a good thing. You know how hard you have to work
So,
in this country to get disbarred as a lawyer?
so all they have these contracts with all of the people who buy this, and it's an expensive franchise. The one person that they spoke to on carte blanche spent 3 million. She paid 3 million rand for her little store in Centurion, I think.
Hmm.
And they seem to have forged all of the paperwork, the financials that she was shown getting
Oh,
in order to buy
hell.
the store. The, mm, and then they lied to her about how much the rent is at the shopping center, with a very specific clause that in between them transferring, because all the Tammy Taylor businesses are in their name, and then when you buy it, they transfer it into your name. Oh my goodness. So they lied to her about how much the rent is, with a very specific clause in the contract that says if you fall behind on any of the payments, then they have the right to repossess the store from you, basically.
Oh, wow. Ooh. So have they been taken on? I mean, are people
So many.
suing them?
Yeah. So that only to find. But so then they've had all of that fight with South Africa, only to find that they actually don't even have the master license anymore from Tammy Taylor in the US. And all of the product that they sell in the store is all fake. They fake all the products. I'm just like,
Jesus.
I wonder
So
if this is going to make it into the storyline of the Real Housewives of Pretoria.
so there's something very dodgy going on. And
Yay.
Pums, does this so when did they film Real Housewives of Pretoria? Because it might be too old
It
now.
has been filmed. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So they've, by the time we see it on air, I think they would have probably finished filming it, because they also have to have like the reunion show, after the show's been out.
hmm.
But the Real Housewives, you gotta watch Real Housewives. Gotta watch Real Housewives. It's a window into the other part of the world that you can never believe exists.
Hmm.
But now it makes
Wow.
me feel like all these rich women are scammers, because
Oh,
what do
yeah.
they do? What do their husbands do?
Well,
Almost all of them. Every
you know,
time I watch that thing, I'm like,
this is why I want to
why
sit
is SARS not watching this?
I want to sit all these people down who want to be famous. And thankfully, the audience in this show are mostly smart enough to know why that's a dumb idea. I want to sit these people down and go, listen, honey, you so bad, you so badly want to be on TV. Take it from someone who's been on TV for what, 25 years. I've been doing radio for 25 years. I know this environment. Let me explain to you what happens. You think it's great to be famous, but you're letting everyone into your life. And this goes for the booths. This goes for Terry Pheto. This goes for all of the stuff that we've discussed this morning, right? You want to be famous? Let me tell you what the upsides are, and then those you could probably see for yourself. And then I'll tell you about the downsides, because the downsides of fame probably outweigh the upsides. Everybody's so hungry to be well known. But let me tell you, when you put yourself on TV like this, they're going to dig around. People are going to find things out. A lot of jealous people are going to come out of the woodwork. Suddenly, you're going to find yourself hating the decision. So, I mean, Kala says, the one lady, Rona, owns our kids' daycare, and her husband is the PE coach at my daughter's school. She can't show her face anymore. You see,
No.
this is what happens when you go on TV, is you think, your life is great. I'll tell you what, be
But
rich.
if she owns the daycare, is she really a housewife?
Well, who knows how they cast these shows? But for God's sake, why would you ever want? I asked Simpiwe this the first time she brought this show up, and I know there's been a Real Housewives of Cape Town, a Real Housewives of Lagos, there's a Real Housewives of every place in the world. Why would anyone with their head screwed on right want to be on this show? The undue attention that you will get from the tax authorities, from the,
We clearly don't get enough attention from the tax authorities. None of these people do.
it's just unbelievable. It's really, here you are, you've got this great life. So all of these women in the one episode that I managed to get through, and my God, was it like treading through a swamp. First of all, I haven't had spot breaks, commercial breaks. I haven't had in my life for months. So I didn't know what that was. So I'm watching live TV and I have to now sit through 5-6 minutes of commercials. And I'm thinking, why would brands want to be associated with this trashy show? And then the show itself is so goddamn slow. And it's these women bickering with each other. Now, obviously, I'm a guy. I don't understand that. When guys talk, they don't bicker about each other. They don't sit around the table asking each other like trick questions and saying nice things but meaning the opposite. Like it's just not interesting to me at all, right? And I haven't been involved in conversations like that in years, so I found it very, very unentertaining. Then I get to the end of this, and I've seen is this. I've seen these mostly really pretty girls who wear too much makeup, but who have these great lives. Like they have these walk-in closets, they have these swimming pools, they have these lives where all they have to do is go to gym, wake up when they want. They don't have to they have no responsibilities. And I think you've got it made, honey. You've got a wonderful, wonderful life here. You've married someone rich, or you've made some of your own money, or whatever you did, but now you are sitting pretty. You've got all the clothes you could possibly. I mean, the half the episode was them choosing fucking outfits, which for a guy is the most boring thing you can ever imagine. And I
But
think,
if they don't do that, Gareth, if
you
they don't show
ruin
it
this?
on reality TV, how can all the plebs like envy them? If they don't show it on reality TV, then nobody knows that's the love they
Let me
have, and
let me say,
therefore nobody can envy them.
if you are a wealthy person and you've become wealthy through righteous and hard work or through crooked means, just please do yourself a favor. Take my words as gospel. Shut up, close the doors of your house, and enjoy your life. Stop looking for the approval of the public. The public are not going to go, "Ooh, that's so great. I wish I was her." What they're going to do is they're going to start tearing at the edifice of what you've built, and they will reduce you to ashes sooner or later. And you will probably deserve it because you've looked for this attention from strangers. And it's the same on social media. Don't do it. And I'm not saying this stuff that you have to hide, but everyone puts up a front. And you can maintain that front if you're just rich and nobody knows who you are because it's mysterious. The minute you let people into your world, oh, dude, it's just so stupid. It's so destructive and dumb and self aggrandizing and unnecessary. Silly, silly idiots. I watched this show and I could not believe that people would do this to themselves. I honestly
Although
could.
I think for a lot of, and there are lots of really pretty girls on these shows. I think that's what it is. It's like this fame monster. Everybody just wants they cannot bear the idea of being anonymous. People must know who they are.
Yeah. 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 I find it very odd. Maybe because I've had so much attention in my life for everything. Everything I say ends up on, a headline. Everything. There was a time where no, I mean, it became impossible. Phumi, you've stood by me in so many of these. I've known you for 20 years, and you've seen it. You've seen it happen. I've never sought publicity. It's just come. And I never considered that a blessing. I always considered it a curse. Gareth Cliff says, Gareth Cliff is. Anytime I said or did anything, it was a major story. And it just didn't. Eventually, it made me a little paranoid. I got over that. Now I'm at a point where I couldn't give a shit. But I'm looking for the opposite of I'm looking for
But
a life like theirs where you have tons of money, but you're anonymous. They're looking for the opposite. It's just crazy. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, what is wrong with you people?
the thing that, and I must admit, I watch some of these episodes with genuine awe at how easily it is for some of these ladies to be so mundane, right? So it's just so easy for them
They're
to be
such,
so mundane.
they're such average people. Yeah.
And but also I'm always watching, and again this week has led me to the realization that there are so many people who have made so much money
Hmm.
in such nefarious ways in this
Oh, yeah.
country.
Oh, yeah.
And as much as everybody says, oh, they hate corruption, oh, this country, this and that, I think a lot of South Africans actually like a lot of these corrupt people.
Yes.
So
Yes.
when they
So,
see it out there, they actually like it. When I
well,
think
for me,
about, yeah,
let me ask you this. So many of us must know these people. They don't live in a vacuum. These corrupt people live among us, and their friends and their family don't report them. They don't call them out. They don't say to them, how come you went from living in a very average little house with maybe one or two bedrooms to this mansion? How did this happen to you?
they
They don't.
live out loud with their corruption.
Their
And I
uncle,
think some
their uncle
like it.
suddenly has three sports cars, and they go, "Oh well, he's a very successful businessman." They don't ask any questions. That doesn't just happen, right? You don't just suddenly end up with a garage full of sports cars. What is wrong with people? Maybe you're right. Maybe people actually like this. They're attracted to the bad guy thing, this
Mhm.
this slightly crooked. They like the idea of a gangster. It's
We're
very
not
weird.
asking that. I'm often asking myself, how did these people get so rich? What did they do? What do they do to have all of this money? And why are we watching in Andy Lempisana and
Mhm.
Mamkize? Why are we
Mhm.
watching them on TV when we know how they
Yeah.
made this money? Why are we not like all of us
Remember,
shunning them?
which politician was it? It's the one who hit that woman in the Cubana. He was on TV a while ago, and he was showing us around his house. Remember, he had this big shiny house, and he had a closet full of like branded clothing and everything. You remember him?
I
And
think
then and then he ordered his servant around, and he was like, I I don't dress myself. I get my servant to put out my clothes, and then
yes.
I point, and they take that stuff out of the cupboard for me or whatever. And then he doesn't even put his own shoes on. Like his butler or whatever it is puts his shoes on for him. He just sits there, and the butler like slips his shoe on, like when you're trying on shoes in a shoe store.
Mm.
I
You
always
know what
thought,
reality show I would love to see? I'd love to see the reality show of all these people when they get arrested and
oh
given the
yeah,
orange overalls. And I'd like to follow them for a day in their life in jail. That's what
they should
I'd
call
like to see.
they should call that show bottom billing, and then they should have. Like top billing is where you get to show off your wealth, and then bottom billing is when it gets repossessed by SARS or all the people you owe money, the people you've defrauded, the lawyers who've come after you. That would be a fun show to watch. I agree.
I'd like
Let
to
me
see that.
let me change the subject because we've got to get some headlines in here this morning. Do you want to hear what's going on in the news? Are you
Mm.
are you very interested? Yes, you are.
Okay.
I know. Let's just
Okay. I'm gonna
let's,
test you out with this one. Test you out if these news headlines are like
all right. Well, the first one,
exciting.
this will interest you because you and I have spoken about this more than anyone else in the media. Prince Bonisi. and company have said that the recent coronation of King Misuzulu was a waste of taxpayers' money. Publicly commenting for the first time since King Misuzulu was coronated at the Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban on the 29th of October, 3 senior royal family members have slammed the historic ceremony as wasteful expenditure. They are all half-brothers of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini. They stuck to their guns that King Misuzulu, they call him Prince Misuzulu, is not king. They insisted the royal family had deviated from the proud teachings of the late king and allowed itself to be infiltrated. Hence, they have no rightful king. There is no king. They insisted the royal house never properly met to select the next king, and the one on the throne is a product of a rushed process to fulfill certain nefarious objectives. We saw developments where taxpayers' money was wasted during an event at Moses Mabhida, and the president was in attendance, they said. It is annoying that a democratic government, which has the support of the majority of the people, can do this. A democratic government ignoring its own legislation on how a king should be identified has deprived the royal family of the right to pick one. This is unheard of, they said in a joint statement.
It's annoying that we're still listening to them.
So we should really just ignore these guys, because who even knew they existed until King Goodwill Zwelithini was dead, right? These people have the cheek to talk about how there's a waste of taxpayers' money, but they probably got a salary from the late King Goodwill Zwelithini to just sit around in the background, or they were on the take, or they're just pissed off that they're not on the take. I mean, it's one of those things. But they worried about taxpayers' money. I don't buy it.
Who is reporting this?
There they are.
You know what I did? You know what I did see 2 days ago? A 4-page letter from Mangosuthu about, again, because so many people have had so much to say about all sorts of things around the Moses Mabhida Stadium, especially the bit. I didn't get to watch it. I was at a funeral on that day. So I missed the whole thing. I only got to see some of the snippets. Did you watch it?
No, I didn't. I saw pictures the next day in the news.
There was a bit with the Anglican bishop, and this is what Prince Mangosuthu was writing about, because there's been some kind of I think it's Prince Mbonisi who was saying why was the Anglican bishop there? Is this some attempt at recolonizing?
Oh wow. Okay.
So
That's interesting.
Prince Mangosuthu wrote a letter, a statement that is 4 pages long, and in a way only he can do. You know how much flair he has for the English language.
Yeah.
Kind of dressed down everybody about how all of this was put together, and how he got to put this whole thing together, and it's the first time really that we were able to put something of this nature together, and how proud he is of how the whole ceremony went down. It was. I'm gonna find it for you and send it to you. Prince
I'd like to see
was
that.
so mad. He's so angry at all of these various people and what they have to say. Oh, but he writes so well.
No, he does. He's a very smart man who's educated and has had a long career in the public eye. He knows how to deal with these things. And he's also, I saw yesterday, oh my God, I turned on Sky News for 5 minutes because I wanted to see what the US election results were. And I hadn't watched all day, which tells you how I've fallen completely out of love with all of those things. I mean, I've just, I turned it on for 5 minutes, and there are stories about a nurses' strike in the NHS in England, which I don't care about. There's a story about someone threw egg at King Charles, which I also don't care about. But it shows you how the world is. It didn't hit him; it went past him. But still, I'm like, what kind of a world is this where we now throw eggs at each other rather than, this would never happen to the Queen or her father or anyone else. It's like society's become so dumb. And so we're just monkeys. We're just monkeys. You look at the NHS strike with all these nurses; they're behaving like monkeys. You see the U.S. elections, and they can't count votes in Pennsylvania. It's going to take them 20 days, they say, to count votes in Pennsylvania. Why? it's these mail-in ballots. It's a whole lot of things. But 20 days doesn't take us 20 days to get our election results. It didn't take
Is that
Florida,
what they said? I did not see that. 20
yeah,
days in Pennsylvania,
them
hand counting all the votes.
to actually certify the results. It's going to take that long. Now that's ridiculous. Monkeys. I mean, it's madness. And I look at this and I'm like, I watched 5 minutes of TV and I switched it right off again. Am I the only one who feels this way?
I haven't watched live TV in a very long time. I think the last time I was watching live TV, so I watched live TV on the day when they had the traditional ceremony, the
Mm,
coronation of the king.
mm, hmm.
So not the Moses Mabhida one. I watched
Yeah.
live TV on that day. I watched elections. I watched lots of live
You
TV
love
for
elections.
elections.
Yeah, sure. No, you do.
And
But otherwise,
I'm waiting to see the World Cup. I'm waiting to see that will be my live TV experience, the World Cup. I'd love to see what that looks like in Qatar. It's been a very muted experience so far. I think, and we all know that Qatar bought the World
of
Cup,
course. Yeah, we discussed this as well last Friday, and
but it's
I
gonna
think that's
be
obvious. But I'll get into it again. I mean, we can complain all we like. I know I'm going to watch it, but that's it. You've just named the only three things that are worth maybe watching a little bit of on TV. This year, the most time I spent in front of the TV was either watching. Uh, no, it's probably the Queen's
everything else.
funeral. The Queen's
And the
funeral.
Queen's funeral. And the Queen's
That's
funeral was live
right.
TV.
Yeah,
I definitely had that on the whole day in the background.
absolutely.
I actually brought my little Apple TV device to the office so
Right.
that I could have it on in the background.
Oh wow. Anyway, all
What
right. Well,
else happens on live
that's all we've
TV?
got time.
What else happens on live TV?
I don't know. People must tell us. People who watch it because I don't see the reason to have it. Here's Cape Town story. We always like these. They're going high tech against crime. They've got drones, cameras, and
Ooh,
sensors that
I
they're
saw that.
deploying. The city of Cape Town is investing in tech solutions to keep residents safe, said the mayor. Together with drones and the city's expanding CCTV network, cameras will feed footage to Cyclops control rooms. It includes dash cams, automated number plate recognition technology, and a recently launched highway patrol unit. So they're going hard against the criminals in Cape Town, and it's about time. The city is forging ahead with its tech led crime fighting campaign. They're going to have drones monitoring hotspots, um, gunshot sensors, so they can pick up when gunshots are gone off by the sound. They pride themselves as Africa's tech capital in Cape Town, bolstered by foreign investment and the software and IT services sector growing. The city, described as the continent's Silicon Valley, is actively on a mission to attract international tech businesses and support startups that will lead to employment opportunities. So, all
Mm.
of this is going on, and hopefully, it has an effect on Cape Town's crime rate.
I am looking forward to see those statistics come out. I hope so too.
Yeah, who doesn't hope so? I mean, I wish we could do this in every city because we need it in Joburg too, right? Um, so then there's a big fuss being made of the Human Rights Commission that have given an ultimatum to the EFF and Julius Malema to retract their comments made at the Western Cape Conference. But I think this is a big storm in a teacup because the EFF obviously are not going to apologize for anything. And the Human Rights Commission don't really have teeth, do they?
So when I saw the statement, the question on my mind was they've already said this, right? It's dead and
Mm.
gone. It's like in the wind.
Yeah, it's done its thing.
All the people who were there on the day who heard this
Mm.
speech, were they affected to act in that particular way? Is it really worth revisiting today to say, oh, you should never have said that? And hope that, well, today, I think Julius Malema is going to be on TV this morning on Newsroom
Well,
Africa, I think, live on Newsroom Africa for an entire hour. So, for the first time in a long time, he's not going to be holding court in his own boardroom as he does. and calling all the journalists to his boardroom. He's actually going to be on TV. There you go, live TV. I don't know how many people are going to tune in.
But Phumi, unless we eventually have someone paying the price for actual hate speech, it's just going to be a theoretical discussion. You know, we had this discussion with AfriForum, who are appealing their hate speech case. We've discussed all of this before, and it's more blah blah and less action, less action. So until we actually see someone going to jail for for malicious hate speech, then it's just really say what you want.
Yeah, it's after the fact. I think the thing for me is that after the fact, coming out to say on that day, I don't even remember that day. I don't even remember that day or the speech that he gave.
I never heard it, but I'll tell you what he said. So what he said was, I'm going to quote from him here: "You must never be scared to kill. A revolution demands that at some point there must be killing, because the killing is part of a revolutionary act." That is just one of the statements that landed him in hot water with the Human Rights Commission. I mean, who's sitting around waiting for the South African Human Rights Commission to speak out about something?
So I think Julius Malema and what he says and all of the fines that they've had to pay are probably one of the biggest funders of AfriForum.
Probably. And it's a great way for them to get money. Because if Julius keeps on saying stupid stuff and you can get money out of him every time he says stupid stuff, that is a pipeline of serious income, right?
When is the next EFF conference? Do you think
Oh my
Julius
God.
Malema is going to be the
Well, I mean, if every time he opens his mouth, as you say, the people like AfriForum and maybe the Human Rights Commission, they start wringing their hands. They're like, this is great, because now we can make some more money out of this idiot. All right. Let's talk about the other headlines. There's one other one I want you to hear about this morning. Elon Musk has sold $4 billion of his Tesla shares. This is interesting. He sold another 19.5 million shares of the electric car maker. The news comes less than 2 weeks after he completed the $44 billion takeover of Twitter. Tesla's share price has fallen by more than 50%. So he's realizing the loss. Separately, Tesla is recalling just 40,000 of its vehicles. Ooh, that's bad, because of a potential problem with their power steering. The reason for the latest sales, which took place last week, has not yet been disclosed. The latest sale brings the total value of Tesla shares sold by Mr. Musk to almost 20 billion. He sold 8.5 billion of the Tesla stock in April this year, another 7 billion in August. This is going to make everybody else who has shares in Tesla very nervous, right?
Do you think he's selling his shares to pay for his unwanted purchase of Twitter?
I think he did a share swap there already. So I don't think that really matters. But it is, right now, stocks and shares are a disaster. I see that Bitcoin this morning is at $16,000, and we were complaining about $20,000. So everything,
What else did I see? I also saw
everything,
a crypto
everything
somebody
is
put out. They have frozen one of these crypto sites. They have frozen their sales. Let me look for it. Crypto, Gareth. Crypto. No, I
no, it's a
can't find
disaster.
it.
It's a disaster. Bitcoin is at $16,353 this morning. I'm not emotional. I just coughed. But I should be emotional because I own crypto. I've got some crypto, and I'm just devastated. I don't even want to look at my portfolio this morning. Someone brought it up yesterday, and I just said, just shut up. I don't want to talk
Then
about it.
you were emotional.
Yeah, well, I definitely am now. Anyway. All right. Imagine selling good stock for bad stock, says Zanele. That's a good point. 4 years ago, Anthea Gardner warned us against crypto. Yeah, Tracy, maybe you're right. Listen, mea culpa as well. I do still think that there is the promise of decentralized investment, storage of value, all of that stuff. And I'm not going to turn away from this right now. I can't. I must say that all the big crypto bulls that I know have gone very quiet lately. They're all licking their wounds. But no one is sitting on more money right now than they had at the beginning of 2020. And it's because of all the things that have happened in the world since then. No one has got more money than it's just, unless you were extremely, extremely rich at the start of this thing, and you don't really care
Now
if you
you're
lose
just rich.
a billion here or there. Now you're just rich. But the rest of us have all taken a knock. Show me a stock position that has given you massive returns and no losses. Show me a company that's just, posted the most incredible results month after month after month. We're going into a recession, a global recession.
All the
There's no
finance
doubt
houses here in South Africa, we've been watching their sense announcements. We've been watching their sense announcements. All the financiers, all the banks, over the past
yeah.
2.5 months, all their results have been spectacular, and they've given all those incredible bonuses to their executives. We spoke about it a couple of weeks ago. Remember, FNB First Rand came out and
well, that's because
spectacular results.
No. Our banks take very few risks, and obviously in this country they are very firmly positioned. They're a cartel. It's a cartel of banks, and they charge big fees, and none of them is better than the other when it comes to comparing the kind of money that they make. Some of them are positioning themselves as more or less innovative and more or less cool. It's all marketing, but they're all in a cartel, and they've got a stranglehold. So I'm not surprised they're doing okay. But other than them, can you name any of the companies that you and I invest in that anybody's watching the results of that have just gone like this over the last 2 years? Very, very few. Very few.
Over the last 2 years and over the last 10 months, I have no more investments. Every single kind of nest egg, because this is what inflation does. And you're right, we're going into a global recession. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next, now that the election cycle is over in the US, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 3 weeks over there. Because it's not just the UK that's in meltdown. It's not just, sanctions against Russia. It is worldwide, and it's going to reverb all the way down here to South Africa. If you think that the price of cooking oil is the thing that has a lot of South Africans already kind of hyperventilating, the price of petrol has a lot of South Africans hyperventilating. Buckle up, it's going to get worse.
Right. We'll get into the US election results in the next hour. It's the burning platform. It's something that everybody looks forward to every week. We've got Mighti Jamie joining us. We've also got Brooks Spector who will be joining us. And we've got so many things locally and internationally to discuss. Plus, a little bit of a lesson on how it all works, because most South Africans are looking at this thing and going, why is there a governor, a senator, and a representative in certain election ballots this time around? Why is it that certain states are doing it, other states are not? Maybe you want to know how the whole system works, so I'll explain that too in the next hour. Stick around. cliffcentral.com, Thursday morning with me and Phumi. Okay. Do you want to say something, Phums?
They are matching pajamas for families that I wish I could show you. Can you see this picture?
Can wait. Just hold that right there. Matching pajamas for families. Is this what you're looking at?
This is said Woolworths for Christmas. And I sent kind of a picture of this last night to say, I think we need to get these. He's just sent me a 1-word answer. No.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's no kid. I think that's cool. All right, when we come back, the burning platform. Stick around. Let's go. It's already time for us to get into the burning platform, cliffcentral.com, on a Thursday morning. Phumi Mashigo and I here to look after you, and with a couple of guests joining us who will help to explain what is going on, not only in the US midterm elections. The results are coming in. Of course, some places it's going to take a very long time. Other places, it won't take such a long time. But I have a basic breakdown for you, which I'll give to you now. We got Brooks Spector joining us a bit later on, former US diplomat in Africa and East Asia. He's written for the Daily Maverick from its inception. Post-retirement, he's also been a Bradlow Fellow of the SA Institute of International Affairs and a Writing Fellow of the University of Johannesburg's Institute for Advanced Studies. We'll also be joined by Mighti Jamie, who has been a regular on the Burning Platform, someone who is a researcher, analyst, and commentator. We like to hear what Jamie has to say about a whole bunch of things, and this morning will be no different. He will give us some comments on coalition governments. We need to talk about Ekurhuleni in Johannesburg, on COP27 on South Africa being used as a pilot for green energy transition. And I have to say there's so much hypocrisy going on over there. Let me just show you this quickly. This is a map of all the planes flying into Sharm el-Sheikh and around Sharm el-Sheikh. All of these planes making huge carbon emissions. Phumi, I mean, this is like, you know, all these people arriving there by private jet, by massive jumbo jet, by all kinds of other means. Of course, none of them using green energy themselves. It's a big hypocrisy going on there. And of course, it must be giving Greta Thunberg headaches like you can't believe. Here's also a list of the cities, the most polluted capital cities in 2022. New Delhi in India, Dhaka in Bangladesh, Jamina in Chad, Tajikistan's capital, Dushanbe, Muscat in Oman, Kathmandu in Nepal, Manama in Bahrain, Iraq, Baghdad, and it goes down the list. All of these are the most polluted cities in the world. I don't see any of the countries that are leading COP27 in that list. So that should tell you a lot too. We'll get into it, I'm sure.
And the worst thing
You're a
for
bit
me,
soft, Pums. I don't know what's going on there. Your mic levels have
Simpu has
dropped.
been busy working with the microphone. Is this better? Simpu is
That's
busy, like
much better.
she, she's
Go on.
she's organizing. No, what she's organizing, but anywhere you go to in South Africa, we know the biggest problems that we have when it comes to the environment, at least here in our country. And what it is it's access to water, right?
Mhm.
We know about how much the Kalahari has
Mm.
grown over the past couple of years, right? So we know that one of the biggest environmental threats we have in our country is desertification. And it's not necessarily kind of energy, green energy or pollution or any of that stuff. But nobody's talking about that.
No.
Nobody's looking at the answers that we need to really change the lives of South Africans. But hey, our president is over there in Egypt with his begging bowl.
Yeah, of course.
What a wonderful name. Just transition. Just
Mm.
transition to clean energy.
That's all a big scam, if you ask me. It looks suspicious as hell. And Cyril's not new to being taken in by these guys. But anyway, we'll get to that with Jamie in a second. Let me just, hey, Jamie, nice of you to have you join us this morning. We've got lots to talk about, and thank you for your time as always. Is that your dog in the background?
Jamie, let the dog in.
No, it's not my dog. Good morning, everyone. It's just the dog outside.
All right, let me start off because I got a message from somebody yesterday to please help understand how US government works. Now, I could get Brooks Spector to do this for you, but I'll do a very brief overview because there are a lot of people who are confused by how this works. And in the US elections, you may be confused as to what a governor is, what are the others, the senator, what a representative is. So let me help you understand. So each American state, America is a federation of states. It's the United States of America. So all of the states pretty much run themselves, and in the vision that was outlined by the founding fathers, the states themselves had the ability to run 90% of what went on inside of them. each state has its own executive function, which is the governor. The governor is kind of a state version of the president. He leads the state. He's got a lieutenant governor who's similar to the vice president, but at state level. Then each state has 2 senators, and they are both at federal and state level meant to be representing the state's interests. There was also, because when Jefferson introduced the idea of a Senate to the founding fathers, and in the Constitution and the founding documents of the United States, the original idea of the senators was that America would be an empire, and that the senators would also run the overseas dominions of that American empire. This was 1789, so the world was really just empires and vassal states. That's all there was. And America didn't see itself as a vassal state. They'd just broken off from Britain, and they wanted to be a global power. And that obviously came to fruition many years later. But you have governors at the state level, and then you have state legislatures, which is kind of like our provincial legislatures, like where the Free State, woman was in the sex tape with the Nigerian dude.
With a little bit more power, a little bit more autonomy.
A little bit more power. Yeah, should be plenty.
Federation.
Correct. The federal system means that the state should be more important than the federal government. Then you've got the president and the 2 chambers, the two what do you call them? Levels of Congress, which is the Senate, which we've already discussed. Each state gets 2 senators, and then the House of Representatives. And that's more like the ward system that we use in South Africa. So they demarcate certain wards, and every couple of years they have a census and they redraw those boundaries. But essentially, that's by population. So the House of Representatives is, the population map of the country and where people vote. The Senate is 2 from each state, which, they're meant to represent that state's interests at a federal level. And then you've got your governors and your state legislatures, and all of that happens. Plus, in these elections, a lot of Americans have also voted for every other local office. So you've got people voting for propositions that are on the ballot, like, should we allow hairdressers to operate on a Monday? That's actually part of the US ballot, and there might be questions like that in every individual state's ballot. There are also lieutenant governors, there are local judges, because they elect judges in America, and a lot of those things. And many people ask, well, why do they have midterm elections and the presidential elections? Every 2 years, they either do the midterms or the presidential. And that's because they've got 2 separate timelines, effectively. Presidents and members of the House sit for 4 years, as do senators. But they've sort of got different timelines. So, for example, in this last election, we didn't have some of the states voting. You had states like Wyoming and Minnesota and Mississippi that didn't vote in the Senate elections this time. But there are other states that did, like Colorado and Washington State and Oregon and places like that. So you'll see, for example, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, they didn't participate in this because they'll only do their elections for senator in the next 2 years. They'll do those when the president's elected. So they fall in line with that election. And they've basically got these 2 separate elections. So there's a little bit of overlap. They say it's a good system to make sure that there's enough change and that there's enough stability. And if anything, and we'll get into the election results in a moment or two, if anything, this election has proven again that the average American is just desperate for stability and something in the center. They don't want these extremists. They don't want the MAGA Republicans that Donald Trump represents and that Donald Trump's been calling for, because he's had pretty poor results. This was meant to be a red wave. Everyone was talking about that, and it hasn't been. It's been nothing but disappointing for the Republicans. And the Democrats have also had their asses handed to them, because they were meant to be with the president, with a tie in the Senate that Kamala Harris could have broken, and with a majority in the House. They technically held on to all levels of government, and they didn't make it work for them. So this is interesting. We'll get into it with Brooks Spector a little later on. Jamie, you want to comment on it? Because you're obviously looking at the results this morning. What are you most interested in when it comes to the US elections?
Well, for me, the way I see it is that it's not actually that the center has won, but that you've got the calcification of divisions in America. Because if you look at an election race, for example, like Pennsylvania, even though Fetterman won over Dr. Oz, his victory was a very narrow victory. I think he won by 90 or so thousand votes out of like close to 5 million. So when you look at those kind of things, you see actually a very divided America and a calcified America. If you look at a place like New York, for example, where Kathy Hochul won, she only won by 300,000 votes. And that's about 5 million.
Which is unbelievable
Yes.
because New York should be a safe blue area for
exactly
the governor race
but
and the Senate and everything else. I mean, it's bizarre that anyone could even give Kathy Hochul a run for her money. Shows you how unpopular they actually are.
That's true, but it also shows you how divided they are, right? In terms of like, it's not a center vote. It's like you got one side clearly on this side and another side clearly on this side. And in the last 2 years of the Biden presidency, those divisions have sharpened. You've got the culture wars, the race wars, and the class wars all factoring into Americans picking tribes and being very reluctant to move out of those tribes. So I actually think that their politics is going to be very dysfunctional for the short to medium term, because everyone is interpreting these results in a way that they want, in a way that's favorable to them. Right. Biden coming out, making it seem like he won, even though they lost 1-0, because a loss is a loss. But still, everyone is.
You make such a good point. I mean, Biden's already out there saying that this was a victory, even though they've lost the House. And they may still lose the Senate as well. But either way, he's going to find himself in a lame duck presidency for the next 2 years. But it has saved his skin, because if it had been worse, he would have had to, the whole Democratic Party would have tried to replace him somewhere in the next 2 years, right?
Well, I think they may still very well replace him, because he's polling at a very low level as an individual. And he was going around saying the election is not a referendum on him, and people shouldn't vote for whether it's a referendum on him. They should vote for abortion. They should vote for democracy. Can you imagine somebody who's a sitting president saying, don't vote because of me, vote for other reasons. Don't make this election about me. That in and of itself is a clear concession that if you say, yes, it is about me and I'm doing a good job or whatever, then people are not going to vote. So the fact that you had to get Barack Obama, you had to get Oprah, if you look at the close seats where they, like, for instance, in Pennsylvania, they had to get everybody there to try to actually get John Fetterman across the line. And that also shows, the level of desperation. You shouldn't have to go and get every other superstar in your team to get the guy who's supposed to be the main player to maintain his mandate. He's supposed to be able to maintain his mandate by himself. But the fact that he wasn't able to be the guy who's the star of the show also shows you how weak he is. Now, the real question is going to be, in my opinion, whether or not the Republicans go with Ron DeSantis or they stay with Trump. If they go with DeSantis, who had an overwhelming victory, he's very popular in the base right now, they probably will beat anybody who the Democrats put up, because the economy is not favorable to the Democrats right now. But if Trump announces that he's going to run again and bullies everybody out in a primary, then it's Joe Biden versus Trump again. We're back right here where we are right now, with this stalemate of progression for the people.
That's a very good, succinct analysis. I can't disagree with any of it. We don't know whether DeSantis and Trump will go up against each other, but we do know that Trump has a habit of ruining this. I spoke with David Smith of The Guardian yesterday, and we were both agreed that it was so unnecessary for Trump to have a swipe at DeSantis in his speech the other day. It's like he doesn't understand. He just doesn't understand party discipline. He doesn't understand that it's not always about him. For Trump, it is always about him. I think
it is about him.
Always. His only comment last night, as the results were coming in, was like to attack somebody who hadn't done very well, who he'd endorsed. He's like, "Oh, but you're a loser. I knew you would lose." It's always about him. It's not about the issues. It's just so unbelievably short-sighted. And that's what we're dealing with. I also think Angus has brought up two things here where he's absolutely right. He says U.S. senators serve for 6 years, which I omitted. I got that wrong. I thought it was 4, but it is 6. And Angus also says that Trump's endorsees did win 174 seats, only 9 of his lost. That again must be accurate if you look at the numbers, but the fact is they wanted a clean sweep, and the Republicans have the opportunity here either to go in the direction of Trump, and you've got people like Carrie Lake, people were saying she was a dead cert to win in Arizona, and it's not so certain for that governor's race. It appears actually that she may have a very, very tough fight in her hands. The House at the moment, let me just give you the numbers. The House is 207 to the Republicans, 184 to the Democrats. And the short story there is that the Democrats' razor-thin House majority is in huge danger, but the GOP isn't making the big gains that it expected. And that's as updated at 7:18 this morning. So,
well, I'm looking at an independent article here that's saying because of of the damn squib that the red wave has become, that they're talking to Mr. Trump to hold back, and to what Jamie was saying, to hold back on to reschedule on announcing his 2024 presidential campaign because of the way that the performance has been. So it's fascinating to see and I really can't wait to have a fuller conversation about what is happening over there with sorry guys, my throat has got a thing with Brooks Spector a little bit later, because I do think that the way that things are playing out now has actually got a bigger impact, and it's probably more centered in some things that have happened much longer ago than what we think. It's not just a Biden and Trump race that we're looking at. I think we're looking at, and we're talking about American politics not becoming more centrist. You're talking about them being polarized, Jamie. I think what we're looking at here is we're definitely looking at a blowback to what has become an incredibly polarized America.
Can I just explain why I said center? Because obviously no one is voting for the center. They are voting for more extreme candidates on both sides. And obviously both, in terms of policy, are going to continue to chase the extreme wings. And the base in both sides is becoming more extreme. What I meant by that is that the average American is just looking for not crazy. The average American is going, because a lot of the people who the Republicans were hoping would vote for them in this election either didn't go or voted for the Dems or voted as independents against the whole thing because they don't want crazy. They've seen too much. You got John Fetterman, who Mighti Jamie's brought up a couple of times. This guy's actually got brain damage. He's had a stroke and he can't speak, and he has trouble reading and writing. And this is a guy they've elected to the Senate. It's crazy.
Gareth, I think the whole world is just looking for a little bit of stability right now. There's a hang of a lot of crazy all over the world. And I think what people want, what voters want here in South Africa, in the UK, and definitely in America, is they just want a country that works. They want a country that works. They want healthcare that works for them. And they want to be able to afford the lives that they live. That's what we all want.
You could even argue that that's why Ron DeSantis got the results he got in Florida, just because he's been running the place well for the last while. So let's just.
But that's not it, right? They voted for DeSantis simply because he is like also ultra MAGA without some of the drama of Trump. The vote for DeSantis wasn't like a centrist vote. It was really like an anti-COVID vote. It was a very anti-woke culture vote. I mean, if you listen to DeSantis, he is a good administrator, but where he falls on the spectrum, he is 5 minutes to Trump, minus the 5% of Trump that really makes Trump crazy. And that's what makes him palatable to a lot of people. So if you look at the candidates, there were some poor quality candidates who cost Trump because he chose, people he thought like Dr. Oz. He just like Oz is popular. He was on Oprah. He'll win. And he chose.
And he's already blaming Melania for that. So Melania is the one that said he should.
All right. Can I pause this, because we are going to have Brooks join us, but only in about 15, 20 minutes. So if we just hold that for a minute and come back to South Africa, because there's plenty to discuss here. And I know, Jamie, you've got an agenda of points. I brought up COP27 just a little while ago, and everybody's gathering in Sharm el Sheikh to talk, more hot air, more carbon dioxide. They're flying there in all their planes. This is the biggest bullshit thing ever, this COP27. Why are we even doing this?
Well, I mean, climate change is a big issue, right? I mean, the environmental issues are quite significant. The issue that I take with the way the discourse is going is that, we've got South Africa now being used as an experiment for a transition, just transition, so it's called. And Africa as a continent only contributes about 4% of global emissions. South Africa is not in a position right now to move away from coal and any other proximate products. We need to be using coal. We need to be using gas. We need to be using all of the things that are available to us. We haven't even industrialized. If you look at the industrialization base, manufacturing is only 10% of this particular economy's GDP, meaning that you still need to have a lot of growth in manufacturing and industrialization to really match the other G20 partners. So to come to a country which has not yet fully industrialized and to actually say, get off coal and start going on this transition with energy solutions that are not as sustainable, I think is particularly weird. And also just going to Africa to make this request is one that doesn't make sense. I think what the Zambian president signed up for makes more sense. Reforestation, that kind of project makes sense. Getting more hydro power support, that kind of support makes sense. But to come to African countries and say, get off coal at the same time while buying coal from African countries, because this is what Germany is doing. This is what a lot of the European countries are doing to kind of deal with the energy crisis that they're facing because of the war. It's weird. You're saying to South Africa, get off coal, while simultaneously saying, give us all your coal. It's illogical.
Although I think one of the things that we're not spending enough time talking about is, and I know I made a small jab at President Cyril Ramaphosa and the fact that he's got a begging bowl out there, is actually the amount of loans that the man is taking out. So the thing about the just transition, as they're calling it, is it's not escalating the timeline in, the decommissioning of coal-fired power stations that we have is going to remain. The timeline that we have is going to remain. But what he is out there doing is he's out there taking loans for putting more money into different cleaner energy sources. But nobody is having a conversation that says, okay, so all this money that you're taking in, where is it being put? Where are we building these alternative fires? Where are we building all these alternative energy stations? No one has shown that. And he's just out there signing all these loans. And the reality of it is that come 2024, when we are going to have a new dispensation, because we can see this, right? The writing is on the wall for the ANC, is whoever the government of the day is that takes over in 2024 is going to have all these huge loans. And I will bet you anything that that money will not be there. That money will not be there when that new government takes over in 2024. As is what happened with the COVID-19 monies. But nobody's having that conversation. Nobody's having the conversation that says all these loans that he's taking up, what are the interest rates on these loans? Where are they going to? Where are they being invested? We haven't seen anything being said or done or signed up. That's what Cyril Ramaphosa does.
We've got a non-curious media. Our media are just praise singers for Cyril largely, and will continue to report on him in as favorable a way as possible without asking any incisive questions. And look at how
where does this money go? Where does this money go? Because it has
the media.
You guys are
also the media, and I think this is also a media platform, and we should look into that, right? We should go and look for the documents, make requests using all kinds of legislative instruments that do exist that allow you to, PAIA allows you public access to information to request this stuff so that we can look at it. Because I think Phumi is asking very important questions around, one, what are the terms and conditions? What are the interest rates? Where is this money going to go? We also do know that, there are other partners who are very close to the president. African Rainbow Energy and Power is a company that is positioning itself to do a lot of this green energy stuff. and it's also owned by Patrice Motsepe, who's very close to the president. And questions around conflicts of interest also need to be asked, and so that we can make sure that everything that is done in a manner that is above reproach and isn't a cash transfer from the international institutions which give the money into these private companies, which may be proximate to the president, and then the public are left with the bill at a high interest rate. Because this is some of the stuff which has happened with COVID-19, was that loans were taken from the World Bank and the IMF, and then we saw the tender fraud lead to that money, the money that was loaned, ending up in the hands of politicians, but the people who will have to pay that are the taxpayers.
And what happens when we owe money with high interest rates? We get inflation, which we're desperately trying to avoid in South Africa, because inflation will absolutely kill those people who still have a little bit of money and will make it even harder for those who don't to be able to borrow.
Yeah, it's a big issue, because it also cuts down how much you can spend when your debt servicing costs keep going up. We saw with Zambia, they kept having less and less money that they could actually spend for social welfare programs and for education and healthcare. All of those things which a state developmental state needs to be able to do. We've already got 18 million people who are actually right now depending on some kind of grant payment from the state. So if you already keep having debt increasing, and you have people on the grant system also increasing, and whilst you have the taxpayer base shrinking, that's a recipe for state failure.
Yeah, I wonder how much of this money too. We've got 10.7 billion from France and Germany. I wonder how much of that is actually going to go into building solar and wind energy, and how much of it might just be going into other places that are far less well known to us.
Yeah, it's a big mess. It's a big mess, and we really have to ask ourselves at this particular point, how do we have the right conversations about debt? How do we have the right conversations about this particular energy situation? Because there are many other alternatives that exist. I mean, just adding the word just transition to me is a very social justice talk without real understanding of what really are the just needs for South Africa. Because like you were saying,
it's
water is a
though.
big issue. It is a good title, if no one's going to kick the tires, you just say, oh, we're doing a just transition. So every activist is supposed to say, well, it's just, and it's a transition, and I care about the environment. So let me move on and look away. And that to me already gave me like a bit of a, red flag feeling, because I was like, this kind of labels to me, when a thing is overly labeled, then you know that something is happening. It's like with the, what do they call this, the environmental measures that they're using now, where even Enron was getting positive ticks. All of the companies, the oil companies were getting, it just didn't make any sense. Like, how is this oil company getting ESG? There you go. That's the one. So I think we do have to be cautious and really do think around. For right now, I wouldn't prioritize transitioning South Africa on an energy basis. I would actually prioritize some of the other environmental issues. The water issue is a big issue. Some of the deforestation issues are a big issue, and trying to get funding for the extreme weather events, and making sure that funding goes to the rebuilding, because we're going to see more extreme weather events. I wouldn't actually just be focused right now as a developmental state on just saying, let's go to coal, let's go off coal and go to like green solutions, which aren't always reliable. Solar and wind. Do we even have that much wind? To even say we're going on wind, we're going on solar.
Well,
these are not 100%.
I would say that if you just set up some of these wind farms inside the rooms where all these COP27 leaders are meeting, you could generate enough wind energy for planet Earth. But I'm being sarcastic, obviously. Jamie, I know you want to talk about coalition governments, and we've spoken about this with a few of our other guests recently, most especially last week with Mpopalatse from Johannesburg, the new mayor. Now, how do you think these are going to work, and what do you think the state of coalitions are? Phumi's already said it's inevitable that we're going to have coalitions to deal with. Are there examples of where we've done this well in South Africa, or are you very negative and pessimistic?
Well, you know what? I think we're actually at the very beginning of this particular journey. And now I think a little bit more maturity is beginning to creep into the room. And if I look at the DA, for example, and the way that they were having conversations last month and the way that they're having conversations now, I'm seeing a little bit more of decorum and maturity just creeping in, because at the beginning, they were saying DA-led coalition. Now they say multi-party coalition. There was a lot of shouting and screaming on social media platforms from DA leaders, which was not helpful. But I think the egos are beginning to recede a little bit more diplomacy is coming into the room. And now what I'm seeing is the ANC is the one that didn't do its game theory calculations right, because at some point they were negotiating with the EFF to give the EFF Ekurhuleni and then to take Johannesburg. But those negotiations were, basically, sabotaged by the ANC. And then they ended up basically not getting Ekurhuleni and also not getting Johannesburg, because now they're not going to have the support that they need. So Mpopalat is going to actually, stay on as mayor by all prospects. So I think previously we had this idea that we're a multi-party country, but we had dominant parties. We had the ANC dominating parliament, we had the ANC dominating most of the provinces. But now, we're actually getting into this position now where the multi-party side of things has to kick in. The two worst case scenarios that we must always be aware of: number one are Italy, and number two are Israel. For the, in the last 5 years, Israel has had like since 2019, last 3 years, Israel has had 5 elections. So now Netanyahu has a bit of a majority, but the fact that they had to have 5 elections since 2019 is evidence that coalitions can break down in ways that are very dysfunctional. And in Italy, I don't think any coalition government has finished a full term of office. So we want to watch out for those two worst case scenarios and move towards some of the stuff that we're seeing in Europe with Netherlands, with Germany, where the coalitions may take a bit of time to set up, but they're very stable. Right now, I think that we are not anywhere close to where we need to be. There's still a lot of dysfunction, but I don't think that dysfunction is going to stay permanent if people become more mature about how they navigate things. But I must say that we're only at the very early stages, and a lot of dysfunction is still in the room. There's a lot of dust in the air, so to speak.
All right. Well, while we've got you on, what do you think of this Human Rights Commission finding against Julius Malema? Because Phumi and I spoke about it briefly this morning, and neither of us are particularly moved by it. It seems that Eyewitness News was making a big fuss of this yesterday. There was some noise about it on Twitter, but then anything can create noise on Twitter. Do you really think that this is important? Is it important that the Human Rights Commission says anything at this point to someone like Julius, who really is he's incapable, just like Trump is incapable of interrupting the midterms? Julius seems incapable of saying things which aren't going to hand some of the EFF's money over to people like AfriForum.
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, just to speak on those comments, there were definitely wrong comments to make. You can't be advocating for the killing of people. You can't be advocating for anything to that effect. Words do have impact, and as far as possible, we don't want to be affirming any hate speech or any form of speech that can really pose a threat to people in the real world. Section 16 is very clear. I think the other legislation is very clear. So I think that the Human Rights Commission was very correct to call out and say these parts of this particular speech were wrong. And I think we shouldn't diminish, even the fact that they're doing it, because as far as can we hold people accountable in the real life if they're very powerful, that's a secondary conversation. I think we must agree that certain comments are wrong. When I think about Kanye West, a lot of the things that he has been saying, slavery was a choice, his DEFCON 3 comments on the Jewish community, some of the sexist comments that he's made, all of those things we need to be able to underline and say, these particular comments are wrong, even though this particular person is popular, even though this particular person is powerful, these particular comments are not defensible and should be called out for what they are. I do think that there's still a contestation around discourse in South Africa, and that contestation will continue. But as far as possible, discourse practitioners should be able to say, these are the red flags, these red cards rather, these are the yellow cards, and this is where discourse happens. Because if we don't do that, I think that the discourse degenerates and we end up having, the kind of discourse which doesn't take us anywhere. So I think there should be more emphasis put on the ruling in terms of just in the general discussion, even though they may not be the kind of consequences people may hope to see, because maybe they will pay the fine, maybe they will retract the statement, maybe they will appeal and lose at another court. But I think fundamentally we have to be honest with each other and say you can't be advocating for people to kill people. You can't be, even if it's in a political context, those kind of words really are harmful and hateful and can be damaging to the discourse.
Obviously, the Human Rights Commission only has a certain amount of power to actually enforce some sort of consequence in this situation, and so far people haven't seen consequences because there's all these legal appeals. There's is this, you can say this, you can't say that. We've still got that AfriForum case which has to be settled at some point after their appeal, and it just seems to me that really right now it seems like a free-for-all for a lot of people. You just mentioned it is a bit of a
free-for-all.
Yeah.
But that doesn't take away from, it doesn't take away from the moral.
I agree, but if there are no consequences to any of this, then why wouldn't people just carry on doing what they're doing? Whether it's Julius Malema or whether it's someone, who actively goes out and does much worse things and says much worse things. I mean, there's not much worse I can think of than kill people, but it's only a matter of time before someone says that person X is making hate speech comments when they think that they're perfectly entitled to, because they've seen no consequence for people like Julius Malema.
Well, to be honest, I think there have been consequences for the EFF. They've paid AfriForum before, right? And I do think that they will retract the stuff and maybe appeal. But I also think we must separate the political comments made by Julius Malema and some of this symbolic stuff like the songs. And, I don't think that there was an honest discussion by AfriForum around struggle songs, the insistence that they were literal, etc., was very ahistoric and not contextual, because we all know that South Africans have been singing these songs for over 50 years. And those songs are part of, the revolutionary culture and tradition. But this is totally different to some of the stuff that Julius Malema was saying at that particular Western Cape event. So I think those are different. But in most of those instances, it does look as if the EFF has been, willing to comply, even if begrudging and complaining. It's not like they're ignoring court judgments and not complying with them. They're just not always happy about the outcomes, which is slightly different.
Right.
One of the things that we're very lucky with in this country so far is that we don't have people who act on these comments. We don't have people who act on this madness. I was just listening to a podcast which reminded me of Timothy McVeigh. Do you remember that name? Oklahoma City bombing.
Oh yeah,
yeah, Timothy McVeigh. Sure.
Oklahoma City bombing. In that, in America, when they have kind of utterances of this nature, whether it is on the far right or on the far left, what you then see is you see individuals who do actually take up arms, who do put, they have domestic terrorism on this. So here, what we haven't had in this country, thank God, is we don't have people who listen to a Julius Malema at a rally ranting and raving in that manner and then goes out and acts on it so far, right? But the problem with not holding them to account is the fact that you ramp it up enough. You eventually do get to a place where people are inspired to act on these utterances. And for as long as we don't have enough of a hard consequence that puts a stop to this type of utterances, then we are still on a very slippery slope, I think.
All right, let's park that because we have Brooks Spector on the line now. Brooks Spector is, of course, a former U.S. diplomat, and he's been in Africa and East Asia. He's also written for the Daily Maverick from its inception. He's a member of the Bradlow Fellow of the SA Institute of International Affairs and a writing fellow of the University of Johannesburg's Institute for Advanced Studies. He joins us this morning to talk election results. Brooks Spector, how are you? And what are your immediate takeaways?
Oh, good morning, Gareth. Good morning, the rest of your guests. I hope you can hear me. And if I look a little bleary and sort of unraveled, it's because since yesterday I haven't had much sleep. I got up at 2:30 in the morning yesterday to watch the election returns, and answer everybody and his brother's questions about it. And now I'm up to answer yours. A couple of quick observations. Well, no, it's okay. It's a public service, Gareth. I have to do this for you. Even if I agree or disagree, I still have to do it. Two observations. Republicans generally produce some of the most extraordinarily inept candidates because they were people who swore loyalty to Donald Trump. And ultimately, voters make judgments about the quality of the candidates and the quality of their thinking and their ability to act in the interest of the larger public. And that's one observation. And the second, I guess, is that despite all the arm waving and shouting about the red wave, the Republican, the likelihood the Republicans were going to crush the Democrats in this election, and given the fact that in 36 of the last 39 midterm elections, so that goes way back, the incumbent president's party has lost ground consistently. So that's that's about as clear a consistent pattern as you can have in politics. In spite of that, the Democrats held on, and they may yet still contain the Republicans in controlling the Senate, and they'll be within spitting distance of holding the House of Representatives. They'll lose that probably, but be very close. A lot of the polling got it wrong because the pollsters were so nervous that they overcompensated in the way they drew up their samples and their selection and their filtering, or because a lot of the pollsters were in fact a little suspect, a little dicey, in almost deliberately trying to pre-cook their results. And so you had this feeling that the Republicans were on the road, they're ready to go, they're gonna crush all their opponents, and then surprise, when the voters showed up, they had a different idea.
Yeah, I think everybody's looking at this going, we've been fed some pretty poor information, and you've just explained why the pollsters might have got it wrong. But this is good news for Biden. He's been out there already. He's said this is terrific. He considers it some kind of an endorsement of his presidency. The Dems aren't in the most favorable position possible. Of course, it'll result in him being a bit of a lame duck president. No. And of course, there are also still going to be in the Democratic Party lots of people talking about who else we could put up for 2024 if Joe Biden, who's already quite advanced in age, isn't able to perform over the next 2 years. He's got a tough task ahead of him, hasn't he?
Well, he does, but I think the tougher task is, in fact, that Donald Trump, instead of being the Tyrannosaurus Rex of American politics, he's got, now mixing our metaphors unmercifully, he's proved to have feet of clay and not well-baked clay. He endorsed all these folks, and they didn't win. And he ranted and he raved in various speeches, some of which began to border on incoherence. And there are a fair number of people among Republicans, most notably Ron DeSantis in Florida, the governor in Florida, who in a lot of ways was a mentee, if you can use that word, but a smarter guy, better educated, more thoughtful, less personable, perhaps. He crushed his opponent in Florida, and he has now firmly set himself on the course of contesting for the Republican nomination for the presidency in 2024. There are lots of other Republicans who want that nomination too, and they're all going to have a chorus, a very steady chorus that says, "Thank you, Donald. You've set a path. You've cleared the forest. You've opened the way for the sunlight to stream in." Yeah. But it's time for you to let the new generation come along. New generation in their 50s and early 60s, mind you, but new generation. And that trigger in the Democrats precisely the thing that you're talking about. Excuse me, Mr. President, sir, but have you thought about what you're going to do with the rest of your life? And the problem there is that the Democrats' bench is pretty thin, and there are no really obvious people to step up and say, thank you very much, Joe, but it's time for the next generation among us to take charge. With the exception, and I just tossed this name out because you may never have heard of him, a fellow by the name of Gavin Newsom. Does that ring a bell?
He's the governor of California.
Well done. You get 2 points. California is the 6th largest nation economically in the world, remember, and it's got 60 million people in it. And Gavin Newsom has proved to be a rather adept governor, and you're going to see a lot more of him in the next year or two, because he certainly will want to position himself to say, I could be the alternative. Now you may say, wait a minute, there's a vice president, Kamala Harris, and Gavin Newsom will say, she's a lovely woman and I supported her when she ran for vice president, but I think it's my turn. And so you're going to have a change in political faces in America over the next 2 years, people that foreigners are perhaps less familiar with than the names that they have become either comfortable or excruciatingly painfully aware of in American politics. And we're going to see these folks fight it out.
Brooks, speaking of names that we have known for a long time, what about Miss Pelosi? When will the time come for her to be put out to pasture? Because, I mean, I think not only is Joe Biden quite old, she too, sitting there in that position, is quite old. Where is, in the Democrats' part of life, more interesting, more vigorous leadership going to come from? Do they even have it?
Well, when I'm 80 in 7 years, I hope I have the energy and stamina that Nancy Pelosi has, first of all. She always looks composed, and she always looks like all the pieces are in order. And as far as I can tell, her mind is as sharp and as politically adept as it's been for forever. I mean, she learned politics as a child. Her father was mayor of the city of Baltimore when she was a kid. So she's had this political style, but she's already made choices about thinking that maybe, just maybe, she doesn't want to be Speaker of the House or come to that minority leader in the House after this time around. It is possible that she might not even put her hand up to say, all right, come on, vote for me one more time, because although she will have won her seat with very little effort, not even breaking a sweat, and she'll be back in Congress. There are a lot of younger members of the House of Representatives among Democrats, all of whom would like that job. Just think of it this way. Everybody who gets elected to the Congress, whether it's a House of Representatives member or a senator, they all think they were born to lead. They all think that they could be. They all think that they certainly could be the head of their party in the respective House of Congress that they're in. Otherwise, they wouldn't have run for office in the first place. I mean, humility, is not one of the virtues of people in Congress. And that that's as it should be. But I suspect that if these Democrats do not have a majority in the House, which is likely now, perhaps 5, 6, 7 seats light of a majority, Pelosi will say, all right, I'll do one last stint, and after that, let's get ready for others. And there are a fair number of people, because they'll have 200 members plus in the House of Representatives, and there'll be a lot of people to pick from, newer members. You look at the Democratic delegation that's going to be in Washington come January for the House of Representatives. They even have somebody who is just barely old enough legally to take the oath of office. A young
Wow.
man who was 25 years old who won his district handily. So there's talent that's going to push through in a political sense, whether it's in the sense of being in charge of the ship of state. That's a different question. But certainly, there are a lot of people who will want that job, and when they're in the opposition, it gives them a little more freedom of movement too.
Jamie, I'm sure you've got a couple of questions for Brooks. Can I go with one more quickly before I hand it over to you? Brooks, what about these really interesting close races? I mean, we're looking at Georgia, we're looking at Arizona, and I do want your comment on New York, because New York is a blue state through and through. I mean, we haven't seen a red governor of New York, or a red senator from New York, or even a lot of House seats from New York going red for a long, long time. It's a close run thing there. Must have been a bit of a fright to many people in the Democratic Party that, that the race came down to such a close thing between Kathy Hochul and Lee Zeldin. Any comments on that? And then those close run races?
Yeah, well, the race for the governorship in New York is in a way an outlier. Remember, the current governor, Kathy Hochul, she only just took office when Andrew Cuomo had to vacate quickly for a whole range of reasons, not least of which is affections toward members of the opposite sex. And so she'd barely been in office. I'm being very gentle. It's a family show, right?
We're on radio. You can be honest.
Okay. Pushed his affections upon members of his staff in ways which most people didn't like. So she took over, and it's only been a year or so. So she really didn't have a chance to establish herself as the boss in New York politics. And Lee Zeldin ran a really tough, strong campaign, and he's been a fixture in New York politics for a long time. So his name recognition was not light. It was well known. She got some of the hangover from people who were just a little tired of Andrew Cuomo as well. But it is true that there are a number of seats for the House of Representatives that went to Republicans, partly because the state had been redistricted. That is, the borders of the constituencies had been redrawn. The population had not kept pace with other states that had grown. So the number of House seats actually is I think one less than it was previously. And as a result, there were some fairly intense fights between sitting members of Congress who had to figure out who was going to get which district. And there's also the long time sense that upstate and downstate are different in New York. I mean, downstate, as in New York City and parts of Long Island, are Democratic, and upstate, the smaller towns and cities throughout the rest of the state, are Republican. And pressure was on. But to remind you, Gareth, you should remember these names. George Pataki, he was a Republican governor of New York. And Nelson Rockefeller was a Republican governor of New York for ages. And Jacob Javits was a fixture in the Senate as Republican for forever. Javits looked more like a Democrat than he looked like a Republican, but never mind. And Mayor Koch in New York was also
Koch, and Giuliani as well. I mean, Giuliani, who's now infamously tied himself to Donald's legacy, but he was a Republican. So, all right, Jamie, over to you for the last few minutes of Brooks.
Yeah, my question is really around these big states, the swing states, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona. When I look at even where the results have been called, it's 52%, it's 51%, it's just 50% in Georgia. You've both candidates under 50%, but very, very close to each other. That indicates to me that America is very divided, actually, and that it's not this particular election hasn't resolved the division, more calcified the division. I wonder what you think about that, Mr. Spector.
Yeah, well, partly, I mean, the country is divided, but it's divided on more than just the division between Democrat and Republican. There are geographical differences. I mean, it's a big country, um, and as a result, even within states, big states that you're talking about, there is a real difference between, say, the city of Atlanta, which is a large, significantly black majority city, its surrounding suburbs, which are still substantially white, and the rest of the state, which is largely, but not completely, small town, small city, white, and
Hmm.
increasingly Republican. And then in a state like, say, Arizona, Maricopa County, and which includes Phoenix. Phoenix is the fastest growing city in the United States, and it's about 70% of the population of that whole state. But the rest of the state is startlingly different in political coloration and values or whatever you want to call it than Phoenix itself is. But then it's not simply divided black and white or liberal, conservative, or Republican and Democrat. Remember, too, that the fastest growing minority populations in the United States are Hispanic Americans, some of who are themselves divided among several different communities. Um, I mean, people talk about Florida and they sometimes forget that in a lot of ways, Florida itself contains five very different kinds of historical, geographical, ethnic communities. And so as a result, that those splits in the races in the big states, those 52, 48% kinds of things that you're talking about, they're reflective of the way candidates either do well in negotiating all those different divisions or fail to do so, or whether their respective party manages to gin up enough support so they just barely squeak across the finish line. Georgia's a great case because I suspect that Raphael Warnock won every vote in Atlanta except for diehard Republicans who would have voted for the devil.
Mm.
Um, Outside of Atlanta, the story would have been a little different. And as a result, you get what we have now, which is the split. That's, the piece of paper could fit between the two of them. And you had 2 or 3% to a libertarian candidate, which meant that they're going to be in a runoff. Guess what? Another election. And just a side comment, you referred to the inability of the Israelis to manage to come up with a stable coalition. Actually, they've had those elections, and an Israeli friend of mine reminded me that the coalition that governs Israel has been remarkably stable. It's just the members of the coalition that shift a bit over time. Uh, and as a result, you have somebody like Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been prime minister for a very long time, with some intervals in between, reflective of the fact that there is a broad center right maybe now, among Israeli polity, with shifting members on the outside fringes, this time around, including those two far right, I'm not quite sure how to describe those two parties that are now part of Netanyahu's coalition that are going to be pushing him toward their views rather than from the left pushing him on their views. Netanyahu's a fairly secular figure in Israel. He doesn't really support the religious right's views. He gives into them on cabinet posts and some regulations, rules, and policies because he has to, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Gareth, before you go, I know it's like 1 minute past, but if you can indulge me one last
Sure.
question, and I don't know if we can have a short answer to this, but the number
Sure.
of people who have been elected who had, in one way or another, denied the election result of 2020, what do you make of that?
One word answer: troubling. No, seriously, it is troubling. I mean,
No.
it's a defiance of reality, and it's a defiance of evidence. And I think to a certain degree, it was an effort by many of those candidates to demonstrate their allegiance, their fealty, their loyalty to Donald Trump. I think you're going to find some of those people beginning to edge away from the extremes of those views as they see the new policies, the new people, and above all, the new leadership beginning to emerge. I think Trump keeps promising that he's going to have a big announcement. He was talking about November 15th, and I read today that it may be postponed to the 24th of November, and I suspect that eventually it's going to be postponed until January and February, and then we
Indefinitely.
won't hear about it forever and ever.
Brooks, it's great to have you on. Jamie, it's great to have you on too. I just want to show everybody the contrast here, the kinds of things we've got. Jamie with this, he's in his suit and tie, and we've got the terrifically relaxed Brooks Spector in his dressing gown with this beautiful view of the garden behind him. We like to bring you a contrast of views and opinions and points of engagement here. Both of you, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure to have you, Brooks Spector and Mighty Jamie, on the show. And Phumi, we will see you next week for more of The Burning Platform. Thank you, everybody. Have a happy day.
Thank you.